I forgot. I knew this, but I forgot to mention it. One of the reasons he and I became friends is because we essentially trauma bonded over our tendonitis. Like that's like, I was like, you had like, I remember that time of my life. I felt so like, there's no way to describe how lonely you feel when the thing you're passionate about, you can't do because you feel incredible pain every time you do it. It was such a, I feel like if I was not a musician and I just had wrist pain as like a something else, like, I don't know. I'm not sure what profession doesn't use your wrist, but I think you know what I mean. I mean, this like to have your wrists injured while you're trying to play piano or play bass, it's such a lonely, depressing feeling. Like you never know when it's going to end. And I remember that's how we became friends because I somehow we got to talking about it and I was like, you have tendonitis too? Oh my God, I'm not alone. Like whatever, you know, how did you get out of it? Like, how did you get out of recover the tendonitis?
You know, I went to a professor of mine at the beginning of the semester one year, and I said, I am in pain. I had a wrist brace on at the time. I was like, I'm in pain when I try to play, but I want to graduate on time.
Yeah.
What do I do? And he was like, you're lucky you play bass, man. I'm going to let you play electric bass for one semester. And I think just that little bit of time off allowed me to, I guess, let the inflammation go away naturally, just taking a little bit of time not playing the way that I was on the acoustic bass.
Yeah.
The inflammation never came back again to the level that it was at in that moment. But I mean, I tried a lot of different things. I went to a hand specialist who laughed at me and was like, you know, I'm a hand specialist. I want to do surgery and you don't want surgery. And I was like, no, I don't. He's like, so why are you here?
Yeah.
And it was like, all right, thanks. And we just walked out of there.
It was such a crazy time of my life. And I remember I accumulated a lot of debt that I'm actually still paying off because I was like jumping. And at this time I had perfect credit, by the way, but I was young and I was like desperate to fix this problem. So I was like taking out credit cards to like jump from doctor to doctor. And this is really such a specialized thing that nobody could help you with because even like, yes, doctors understand inflammation, but they don't, so they can give you things like, okay, here's a shot to help the pain and stuff. But in order for a doctor to really help a musician heal that kind of pain, they would need to understand the mechanics of how to play the instrument. Like, so it's really this situation where it's like, nobody can help you. I was able to get help through a teacher who I got so lucky. It felt like a gift. You know, I believe in something. It felt like a gift from a god of some kind that she specialized in helping people play with technique to avoid injuries. And it was like a miracle that I found her and I was able to get over my injury through her guidance. But had I not found her, I would have been totally clueless, like how to get out of it. It was horrible, you know?
Right. And there are people out there who write books about this stuff. Like Effortless Mastery is a book that comes to mind where playing music, I guess the thesis statement of the book is like playing music should feel effortless if you're doing it right. Yeah. It's like, it's the marriage of like mental approach and physically using your hands on your instrument. So yeah, I think having an understanding of yourself, your body and your mind and being able to, I guess, have a, for lack of a better term, a marriage of the two.
So that one professor who I said was trying to get me to stop moving, the reason I started crying with him was because the other professor who got me out of the tendonitis taught me that if I move different parts of my body, tension wouldn't be holding in one place. So for example, like, I don't know if this is going to make sense to the non-musician listeners, but like if I'm playing a chord and if I'm just keeping, I mean, there's a piano right here. If I'm just keeping, okay, watch, see my wrist right now? If I'm just keeping my hand stiff while I play a chord, I'm holding so much tension in my wrist. So she taught me, she's like, rather than just like playing the chord like this, why don't you like utilize other parts of your body? So then I started going like this. And it like to somebody that might be like, you're doing too much. That's not natural. But it's like, no, that like doing too much actually freed up tension being held in one place. Like it moved all over my body. So I became so moved. It was like I feel like a jellyfish just like moving my body when I was playing. And I had one professor that was like trying to break me down and be like, you can't do this. You're not going to be able to play fast enough. And I'm like, I don't give a pardon me. Maybe I'll bleep that out. This is YouTube. They're changing. I was like, I don't give a if I can play the fastest player in the world. I can play without pain and I'm enjoying myself. Like, so no, you know what I mean? So.
Right. And that fluidity of movement is important regardless of what you're doing. I think in any performance setting, you don't want to be holding tension, but also doing a task where you need to move freely.
Yeah.
I think, because what you just did on the piano, I had that same sort of revelation with the bass in a lesson. And I started to ask so many questions and try to understand my body more and more. Okay, if I want my wrist to be able to move freely, what does my arm need to do? My elbow, my shoulder, my posture, like everything is connected with your body. So I think having an understanding of not only your instrument, but your body and how your body does this instrument.
Right. The piano teacher, she was so into it. She called it, and like I said, it was like a gift from God. I would have never learned this without her. But she would literally call it the mechanism. She'd be like, your body is the She was like so crazy, but like crazy in a brilliant way. She was like, your body is the mechanism. She's like, you don't even play piano with your hands, you play piano with your core. And I'm like, what? And she's like, your fingers are connected to your hands, are connected to your wrists, are connected to your arms, connected to your core. She's like, the power comes from within you, not from your hands. That's why you have tendonitis, because it's all in your hands and not in your body. So I guess the other professor, his theory might have been like, you can have zero tension whatsoever by staying still. Like, I guess that's a thing. And I guess that's a possibility, like that you can just kind of stay still and not have any tension, but it didn't work for me. I'm a crazy, like I was telling him before we started, I'm like, I feel crazy next to you because you're so calm that I feel neurotic like next to you. But that's who I am. I can't just like sit there and do nothing. Like the energy is going to just like go somewhere and then I'm going to be tense. You know what I mean? Like I need to move it out, you know?
For what it's worth too, I'm calm, maybe outwardly, but I'm so in my head. I'm thinking at 100 miles an hour. But I was going to say, there's a lot of parallels between what you're saying about the piano and the guitar. When I'm teaching guitar and bass lessons, I think there's a misconception with a lot of students that I've had where you have to like squeeze the notes down. And I always tell my students, it comes from this muscle that's like attached to your thumb down at the bottom of your palm. The strength to press the notes down comes from down here. And ideally, your fingers know what they want to do. They know what shape it is if it's a chord, or they know what, sequence to make if it's single notes, like a scale or a melody or, a solo. But your fingers know what to do and they're able to move freely like this. They're not squeezing, like holding tension in your wrist or the fingers themselves. It all comes from down here. So when you have that guitar neck in your hand, you're pressing on that neck with that thumb muscle and your fingers are able to move about freely on that fingerboard because you're able to create that tension, that pressing down of the strings against the fretboard with this, as opposed to, people thinking it's so, especially if you have a guitar with high action where the strings are high off of the neck, you really feel like you need to squeeze hard. And I'm like, you're really going to have a hard time learning until we get this part first. You want to be able to, play the guitar without it being like painful or tense, otherwise you're not going to want to take the thing out of the case. Right.
In hindsight, I think my injury was a blessing in disguise because if I had continued playing with that tension that I had, if I never had that injury and I played tension like that with that kind of tension, I think I would have just been a horrible player. Like I would have had, if I have tension in my body, there's a tense sound coming out of this instrument. So I think going through that injury and having to like problem solve and figure out exactly why, unlocked potential possibility of my playing that I don't think would have existed if I didn't have that injury, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That level of mindfulness, self-awareness.
Yeah.
And talking to people who do what you want to be able to do very well, right? Like talking to your professor, who I'm sure it was an amazing player.
Oh gosh, she was incredible. Yeah.
Right. Like talking to people who have what you want, so to speak. I took lessons with a couple legendary bass players, and one in particular was an older man, and he told me he had multiple surgeries and he ices his hands in buckets like he's an athlete. Like after every, if he plays a 4-hour gig, he's got his hands in ice water. Yeah. And it scared me, but I almost appreciated that level of realness.
Honestly,
he's like, this is how you avoid injury. Like if you're playing for 4 hours and you're really going in, you're going to have to ice afterwards and you're going to have to stretch beforehand.
Yeah. It's a lot of people listening By the way, sorry for the non-musician listeners if we're getting too technical. You can just fast forward into like, but for everybody else, if you are still listening and you didn't get bored by us, a lot of people don't know that being a musician is you're an athlete. Like you don't think of it because it's sound, but you are using your body. So injuries occur all the time, and they're scary injuries because they're like hidden in little places that like you can't even figure out where they're coming from. Like it took, when I had my tendonitis in my wrist, it took me so long to figure out that the tension was actually in my forearm, because once I started clamping my forearm with like this, like they do with tennis players, whatever that is right here, there's like this clamp for tennis elbow. It relieved so much pain because I was like, oh, wait a second. Like when I squeeze this muscle, no, when I move my fingers, this muscle actually squeezes. So it blew my mind. I was like, wow, there's so much to learn here. But anyways, okay. I do have more questions about music and other things as well.